Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the second My Virtual Jericho of the week. You wait for My Virtual Jerichos and then two come along in a week after Andrew Graham yesterday. Today, another local boy made good, Jim White, local resident. Jim is one of the great sports columnists of our era. He started life in Manchester Grammar School and then Bristol University and then the Independent. He was there at the beginning of the Independent when it was a newspaper. Some of you may or may not remember those days. And then went to the Guardian, and today resides at the Daily Telegraph, where he has a berth. Jim, first of all, first question: tell us what you think good sports journalism is.
Well, thanks very much for that, John. When I was at the Indy, I was told by the then sports editor, a guy called Charlie Burgess, that the point of reporting is to be the reader's representative. So you tell them what's going on from the privileged vantage point of actually being there at the heart of things. And there have been occasions when being at the heart of things has actually been a slightly dangerous place to be. Do you remember Frank Bruno, ex-British heavyweight boxing champion? Well, about 15, maybe longer ago, time flies, Frank Bruno was going to make a comeback. And I was sent to interview him at his then palatial residence in Essex. And when I turned up, Bruno said he didn't want to speak to me unless I found out what it was like to be him. So I had to experience his life. So I thought, well, this is a bit odd. He said, come out into the garden. So we go out into the garden, and there in the middle of the garden is the ring that he won the world heavyweight title in, there in its full. He says, right, get in the ring. So we get in the ring, he takes his shirt off and he tells me to take my shirt off. And as I'll just say, points of comparison, there wasn't much one. He was built like a Greek god, magnificent muscled specimen, and I'm not. And he then gave me a pair of boxing gloves, and he put, those kind of pads that trainers have on their forearms like that. He puts the pads on. He said, right, we're going to have a round of boxing so that you get a sense of what it's like to be me. And he told Tom Jenkins, who was the photographer, magnificent photographer, to be the ringman and to ring the bell at the end of a round. There's a bell there and everything. So we get in there, and I start hitting him on the pads. And I'm apparently not hitting him hard enough. I won't do the Frank Bruno impressions. You all know how he speaks, but he's going, hit me harder. You're not hitting me hard enough. You hate me. I don't hate you, Frank. You hate me. I don't, Frank. Hit me harder. And he starts pushing down on me. A giant of a man pushing down on me as I'm going like this. Within about a few moments, I'm in the corner, crouching with this giant man pressing down on me, and I'm going like this, and he's going, hit me, that's not hard, punch me like you hate me. And I'm really terrified in the corner. And I turned to Tom and I said, for God's sake, ring the bell. And he said, it's only been 15 seconds. So sometimes, you get a little bit close to the thing. But I remember going to, when I was a student, I went to Wimbledon with my then girlfriend. She got tickets, and we went to Wimbledon, and it was the men's semi-final where John McEnroe lost his temper, you cannot be serious, and all that. And I remember my impulse coming out of that Wimbledon centre court that day was, I want to tell everybody what just happened. And I think that's the fundamental of being a sports reporter, or indeed any reporter. You just want to tell everybody what's just happened, what you've just seen, and what it means.
And you've done that, of course, very, very well. How long have you been reporting sport now?
Well, it's sport and other things for way too long, since 1983. So What is that?
7 years.
37 years.
37 years.
Yeah.
My God. You're a fan with a typewriter. How did you become a fan with a typewriter?
Very good description, fan with a typewriter. And I'd always been a football supporter. And, I wrote a book about Manchester United and the 1993 double. 1993-94 season double, and I'd got myself sort of embedded in the club and got to know some of the players and so on. And that was a real insight right in that book, and it really helped me get on with my career. But I mean, principally, what I was trying to do was I was trying to emulate the people who I loved as a kid. I used to love Hugh McIlvanney's lyricism. I loved Wooldridge's observation, Frank Keating's humor, Brian Glanville. Wow, Brian Glanville. He was my utter idol. He was the Sunday Times football correspondent, and I used to get his copy religiously on a Sunday, and steam would rise from out of my collar when I realized, how wrong he was. Yeah, what's he know? And it is still something that I always get. Comments at the bottom of articles. Really, you shouldn't go there, but occasionally I dip into it. And there's always, were you at the same game as me? And I think I kind of guess I wasn't at the same game as other people because everybody sees it differently.
Were you at MGS with Mike Atherton?
I was at MGS with Mike Atherton, although you won't believe this, John, looking at me now. I am a lot older than Mike. So I was in the upper six when Michael arrived as a junior. And even then, there was, because, I loved cricket, and I was the sports editor of the Mancunian, which was the school newspaper. Heard of a guy called Michael Crick?
Yes,
he was the editor. Yeah, Crick was the editor. So anyway, word was out that there was this incredibly talented young man coming into the school. I have to say, I never saw him bat for the school, but he was there. And now this is, something that will never, ever in a million years happen to me. Now there's a sports hall at the school named after him.
Really? How do you rate him as a writer?
Magnificent. That's what really annoys me, actually, because I could never in a million years play cricket as well as him, but he can write a lot better than me. It's not fair.
Yeah. I mean, is he the modern Richie Benaud?
I think so. I think that's a very good analogy, because Benaud was a superb player, but he was also somebody who could translate his knowledge into layman's terms and get it and read it for you. I once interviewed Benaud, charming man, delightful man, but he told me a really, really fascinating thing about he had an innate ability that I expect we all remember Benaud as a presenter of cricket on the TV, so smooth, so genial, so good. Also, he had an innate ability so that if he got in his earpiece, you've got a minute left to go, Richie. He knew precisely when he should be winding up. So he never overran. He never fell short. He just had a kind of inbuilt clock, knew precisely how long it would take him. I mean, a consummate professional, Richie Benaud.
Great broadcasters like that, aren't they?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, it's an ability I'm sure Terry Wogan probably had as well, that you just know how long you've got to fill.
I once said to Mike Atherton's father-in-law, David de Caires, who I worked for in Guyana, he's a modern Richie Benaud, and his eyes opened up. He said, "Do you really think so?" I said, "I think that's what people are saying." So his daughter had done well as far as Dave's concerned. So,
it's interesting you say that about David de Caires, because I noticed that Atherton's son is called Josh de Caires. So he took his mother's name so that he wouldn't be relying on his father's name, and he's just been signed, I think, by Surrey. So basically, everyone's talking about Michael Atherton's son being signed for Surrey, despite the fact he's got his mother's name.
So, who else did you grow up hearing worshiping in terms of writing?
John Arlott was another magnificent cricket correspondent and reporter, and completely loved his lyricism. Again, I use that word. It's the Hugh McIlvanney. Hugh McIlvanney was extraordinary. I don't know if you ever met him, John, but he was extraordinary in that he spoke like he wrote, which is odd. It's a really strange phenomenon that, but he spoke like he wrote. He spoke in these wonderfully fluid sentences, as his writing was, and that made him an incredibly interesting person to sit down with, because along with that mellifluous Scottish accent, he would just be spellbinding. Sorry, he was never spellbinding.
Frank Keating was very good, wasn't he, in the mornings?
Frank Keating was great until he'd had a few, but he was always jolly company. I mean, interestingly, that about the drinking culture that there was, it just doesn't happen anymore. I know that the old cliche about reporters is that they're all drunks, and I remember hearing Michael Parkinson saying that in the 1960s, when he first worked in Fleet Street, there were frequently fist fights on the newsroom floor, because everybody would go to the pub, they'd file their story, they'd go to the pub, they'd then come back and have an argument with the editor or the sub-editor or whoever it might be about why their story had suddenly been reduced in size, and it would end up in fist fights. Nothing like that anymore. I remember an old school reporter called Ian Ridley saying to me, "Oh God, it's not the same in football anymore. You go away for these internationals, and instead of going out all night drinking, they're all up next morning running." And it has changed completely in that sense.
What was it like when you first went into a press box at a match?
Well, fascinating. I mean, I remember the first game I ever reported on was for the Independent at Queen's Park Rangers against Chelsea. And in those days, I mean, now we all have laptops that are connected into the Wi-Fi, and we're tweeting and we're sending stuff constantly for the websites and so on. In those days, you had to ring a copy taker. So you had a telephone in front of you and you rang the copy taker. And I remember when I was growing up as a kid, I always used to get the old Manchester Evening News Pinken from matches, and the match reports would always have the really lengthy diagnosis of the first half and then a hurried couple of sentences on the second half. So the first half would be 0-0, but it would take up 3/4 of the thing, and then there'd be hurriedly, and 5 goals were scored in the second half. And I remember going along and thinking, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to have a full analysis of the whole match, and that's that was my purpose. So the final whistle went, and I hadn't written a word down, I hadn't typed anything, I hadn't done anything. And next to me was an old school reporter who was on the phone, and he was giving to copy takers his match report. He was extemporizing as he went along, going back to that Richie Benno thing. He knew he'd been given 600 words. He knew exactly in his head what 600 words were. He didn't have to count up or anything. And as the final whistle went, he went, full stop, Pa, good night, put the phone down, got up and went home. And that was a real lesson to me. You do not know what you're doing. And,
how long afterwards did you have to stay to write your piece?
I was probably there for about 3 hours. I think I was probably thrown out by the guys in the press box. I mean, the way that things have changed is that you can so rapidly and quickly catch up on things. I remember the 1999 Champions League final. I was in the new camp in Barcelona. I had written a piece for the first edition about it was a step too far for Manchester United. Ferguson had chosen the wrong team because you had to send the first edition before the final whistle. Then Manchester United equalised, so you think, oh well, at least I've got a bit of time to go. There'll be extra time. I can rewrite, and then Manchester United get the winner in normal time. Take a deep breath. You've got 5 minutes to completely rewrite and, change everything from start to finish. 5 minutes, take a deep breath. Before I had a chance to put my finger on the keyboard, I was the very last person in the press box. And alongside us, to my left, was a corporate hospitality area. And a Manchester United fan who clearly bought a ticket from a tout was in the middle of the hospitality area and had enjoyed the hospitality, shall we say. He had been on his feet swearing at United because they were losing and just getting more and more shirty. Then when they won, he was leaping around, and I didn't notice him coming over to the edge of the press box and going down the steps like that, punching each of our laptops off our desk, going, now what are you going to write about, you bastards? So not only did I have 5 minutes to completely rewrite my piece, but I had to do it on a laptop with a shattered screen. You kind of realize that that ability to quickly change is something you have to hone very, very speedily.
How much of an art is it writing against time?
It's an interesting one, that, because quite often you find, just to be technical about this, it's a Champions League game in the evening. You've got to get your first edition piece out very, very quickly. So your first edition piece goes practically on the final whistle. Bang, off it goes. But you then have an hour before the second edition, which you can take on the manager's post-match press conference. You can bring on board his quotes. You can rewrite, refile, redo it. What's fascinating, and I'm not the only one because I've discussed this with my colleagues like Oliver Holt, Paul Haywood, these guys who I really, really admire. What's fascinating is that the adrenaline requirement of writing at speed often makes better copy. It's interesting that, you think, oh, blimey, it's rushed, oh, blam, blam, blam. But actually, sometimes it's really better because, in a sense, and this won't surprise anybody who's read a newspaper, you haven't had time really to think about it.
I mean, do you end up being dissatisfied? I mean, journalism is the first draft of history, and sports journalism is very much the first draft. Do you go back the next day and read and think, I could have done better?
Yes. Often. I tell you where it's a really, really challenging thing is the Olympic Games. I should have gone to Tokyo this summer. Sadly, that was put off. But, I vaguely know what's going on at a football match. I know what's going on at a cricket match. I kind of know what's going on at a rugby match. When it comes to diving, I haven't got a clue. So I go along to watch Tom Daley in the diving. And unless Tom Daley does a belly flop, I won't know whether he's been good, middling, indifferent, or brilliant, really. I don't know. So a lot of us have come to realize that the best thing to do is to kind of cheat. Paul Haywood always says, the most valuable piece of equipment a sports journalist has, or any journalist has, is their mouth to ask questions. So what you do is you sit next to the bloke from Dive Monthly and you just go, what was that like? What should that be? What should you do there? How do you do that? And I remember going to see in Rio, Charlotte Dujardin. I was sent by the Telegraph to do the dressage, Charlotte Dujardin. And I sat next to the woman from the British Equestrian Association, who was in love with dressage and was so delighted to tell me what was going on. And it was magnificent. I was getting a seminar on dressage from this woman, which made it look as though I knew what I was talking about. But often you don't know what you're talking about. Often you fake it.
What's been your favourite gig?
Well, I love the Olympics. I mean, I really love the Olympics. It's so exciting, so different. Without question, the two greatest moments of my reporting career were the Champions League final in '99, because it was so ridiculous, and Super Saturday at London 2012. 2012 was magnificent. It's an oddity now, you know, where everything in Britain looks so shabby and so rotten and so inefficient, and we've got probably the most incompetent bunch of people ever running us. And in 2012, everything was like clockwork. Everything was great. We had that wonderful opening ceremony, which was a privilege to be there and witness. And then things like Super Saturday, which was a glorious moment.
The height of the British sporting empire, really. 2012 was it not? And indeed the BBC sporting empire as well.
Absolutely, BBC. I watched it, actually. I watched it. They repeated it during the COVID thing, and I watched it, and it was lovely watching it again. It was lovely. Actually, they repeated it at the time when we were all going out on a Thursday, about now, wasn't it? Thursday evening, and applauding the NHS. Yeah. And there was that lovely sequence about the NHS, which I think the government liked, because it was all about Nanny and how lovely Nanny was, and I think it reminded them of their past.
Yes, I mean, those two events. I mean, you've written quite a lot about Man United, haven't you? Can you be objective about United?
Well, funnily enough, in the last 6 years since Ferguson left, it's kind of, nobody would suspect that you're a fan, because nobody gets more angry about incompetence than a fan. So they're rubbish. Well, no, they're getting better, but they have been rubbish. So it's not a problem, is it? You're right about that.
You and Michael Crick are both fuming when you go to Old Trafford.
Yeah. Crick has been a long-term supporter. I remember when we were at school, we were both in the school play, and I can't remember what it was, some Shakespeare. We were both, in it, and the teacher said, right, we're going to have a dress rehearsal on Saturday. And Crick said, I can't come on Saturday. I'm going to a United game. He said, no, this takes precedence. You've got to come. So Michael skived it and was thrown out of the cast as a result.
I'm sure he wouldn't want to be reminded of that. What are you working on book-wise at the moment?
Well, I've just done. I just did a big book, a coffee table. I mean, basically writing the captions for a coffee table book for the American market about the FA Cup. And fascinating, in America, American sport has no concept of the underdog. In America, they have defined leagues. You don't have. Nothing changes, and there's no competition in which a big boy can come up against the little guy. So you have no concept of that. The FA Cup is like that. I mean, one of the things I've noticed about being a sports journalist is it gives you a insight into other people's cultures. So I remember in Beijing in 2008, I was in the athletics stadium, and there was one of those occasions where there was a competitor. I think it may have been the 10,000 meters, but there was a competitor in one of the trials, in one of the early stages, qualifiers, who was miles behind. You occasionally get them. He was miles behind, and everyone had finished, and this guy still had a lap to go. And I watched the crowd at the Beijing National Stadium sell out, and they were embarrassed. They were embarrassed for this guy. Nobody said anything. They sat on their hands. Guy finishes to a kind of deafening silence. And I remember saying to somebody, in London in 4 years' time, that guy will be a hero. And it's true. In England, we love that guy would have been cheered. Eric the Eel and all these guys who subsequently did come last, and that guy would have been cheered to the echo. The underdog is a peculiarly British thing. We love the underdog. We love it when somebody with no chance beats one of the big boys.
How do you feel about the Premier League and money and foreign ownership and all of that? I mean, how many Premier League clubs are owned by a Brit these days?
Just trying to think. Well, none of the top.
Your club.
None of the top four. Well, West Ham, I suppose, is the only one. And what kind of locals are they? I mean, a bunch of pornographers. Yes, I mean, it is extraordinary the way that it has become it has become a placing of international money. And one of the things I was quite pleased about was that Newcastle United didn't get taken over by the Saudis, because I think that's another thing that we've got in international sport is this idea of sports washing. So Paris Saint-Germain, Manchester City, these clubs that are basically used as a vehicle for pretty dodgy regimes to give themselves a bit of international credibility. And if the Saudis had taken over Newcastle, you could bet your bottom dollar they'd have put a lot of money in it. Newcastle would have become big contenders in Europe, and we'd have been seeing daily a kind of advertising billboard for a really rotten regime.
Well, Arsenal wear Rwanda on their shirts, don't they? Visit Rwanda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, be careful when you visit there. But I mean, it is really, really depressing the way what happens with more and more of this is that you get a huge disconnect between the very purpose of football, which is to grow out of the community and to be a kind of representative of the community from which you've sprung, and the current use of it, which is to be a marketing tool. And I think that is a very, very distressing sort of a way in which the Premier League has changed things.
Have you got shares in Salford FC or whatever the alternative Manchester United is called?
FC United. Salford is Gary Neville's team that's backed by a Singaporean billionaire. FC United, yes, that's right.
You don't have any shares in that? You don't?
I don't actually know. I mean, I wish them all the best. There is a growing number of kind of fan-owned alternatives. The best of which is Wimbledon, AFC Wimbledon.
But it's the ratchet, isn't it? The foreign ownership is there. It's never going to reduce, never going to go away. That's it.
No, it won't. And we missed an opportunity, which they took in Germany, of ensuring that no one owner can have more than 49% of a football club, and that is part of the constitution of the Bundesliga. The only place where that has been flouted is in the Red Bull Leipzig. So the Germans kept control of their football in a way we didn't.
You've got all this money floating around, so you've got multi-millionaire footballers. What's the highest wage anybody in the Premier League gets that you know
of? In Manchester United alone, David De Gea gets £350,000 a week, which is what, 10 million a year, something like that.
300 for doing nothing, doesn't he, at Arsenal?
Yes, Ozil gets the same. I mean, there is huge amounts of money. It is extraordinary. Funnily enough, this morning I was talking to Gareth Ainsworth, the manager of Wycombe Wanderers. He's just taken his team into the Championship.
Yeah.
Nobody at Wycombe Wanderers is paid more than £1,500 a week, which is £75,000 a year.
Mhm.
And yet they have this incredible team spirit and motivation. And it's an odd one because, talk to somebody who's earning the big money, like Marcus Rashford or someone like that, and they will tell you that they're motivated by performance, they're motivated by success, they're motivated by winning trophies. They're not motivated by money, but they are paid it. So I'm not quite sure why football has got itself into this assumption that the only way you're going to get people to play for you is to pay them.
Some of them have noble. Sterling, for example, gets tickets for his local school in Stonebridge, doesn't he, for Wembley matches?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them do a lot of very, very good work, as indeed we saw from Rashford during lockdown with his work for food poverty, against food poverty.
What's the appearance fee for an England match for a footballer?
Actually, to be fair to the England players, for the last 15 years, they've donated collectively their match fees to charity. So we can't really have a go at them for that.
You can have a go at them for the way they played in the last two matches, can't you?
God, blimey, it was terrible, wasn't it? Oh my word! I mean, that was a really, really depressing thing, watching terrible football with no crowds. You really think, what is that about?
And they played like a training match. It wasn't even a very good training match, was it?
No, and this was prior to them. This was prior to the season. It looked like a pre-season amble, and it was not good at all. I like Gareth Southgate, though. I think he's a good man who's got his head screwed on and will take it in the right direction eventually.
He was barely concealing his anger, wasn't he, at the two boys and the Icelandic models?
Yes. That was a fascinating story. That was Mason Greenwood and Phil Foden, who broke the bubble, the anti-COVID bubble, and did what footballers have done throughout the time, and parlayed their success into sexual shenanigans and invited a couple of Icelandic women back to their hotel room. And they only got caught out because of social media. And one of the women posted a video of them on Instagram, and of course Southgate had to act to that. As it was fine for we reporters, because we could vent our spleen against them and have pictures of the very attractive Icelandic women that they took back to illustrate our anger.
And of course, Jofra Archer went back to his flat in Hove to collect a few things for an hour, which cost him an hour. It cost him 30,000 quid, didn't it?
That's right. That was another breaking the COVID conventions. This pandemic has not been good for sport at all. In many ways. I mean, the latest thing, the restriction of crowds of 6 is really, really difficult for locally. Oxford City, they're in the National League South, and they were due to start on October the 3rd, and they were hoping that they were going to get crowds in. And without crowds, they can't survive. There's no television money in the National League South. They need people going through the turnstile, going to the bar, buying drinks while they're there. And it looks as though that's not going to be possible. And I really do feel I think we might see a large number of our smaller clubs disappearing over the next few months, because furlough allowed them to survive the lockdown, but furloughs ended because they've had to get the players back into training. They're paying the players, and they can't afford it if they're not getting any income.
And Oxford United, have they got a bright future ahead of them?
Yes, I think so. I think, there's always the issue with the stadium. There's always that problem. I mean, there was that comedy, wasn't there, that the new owner, Tiger, wanted them to have a big brand as a shirt sponsor. So he got Singer beer in. Unfortunately, Firoz Kassam, the owner of the Kassam Stadium, former chairman of Oxford United, who will never do anything to help his tenants in any way, had a contract with Heineken. So you couldn't buy Singer beer that was on the front of the shirt of Oxford United in the Oxford United Stadium. That's always going to be a problem that club has got.
Racism in sport. I mean, there is an argument that actually sport has done an awful lot to combat racism. Has it gone a bit OTT on BLM?
I had a very interesting conversation with a sports commentator called Rob Nothman, who ran a course for BBC and other companies, about language of descriptive language. And I was saying, look, the days of Ron Atkinson saying the N-word, that's long gone. Obviously, that's long gone. He said, yeah, it has long gone. But there's still things that we say about people that have certain connotations. So, for instance, he said, Adama Traore, the Wolves winger, is always invariably described as quick and powerful, athletic. Well, he is. Of course he is. That nobody's disparaging him by saying that, but he's also a lot more than that. He's incredibly skillful. He's incredibly thoughtful. He's got a brain on him. Those elements of his playing style are never ever used. And it wouldn't be the same. It just wouldn't be the same if he was a white player. And he said it's a kind of unconsciousness about it. Now you're from the Caribbean. I thought one of the most moving things that I heard about this whole Black Lives Matter business was from Michael Holding, because like you, I'm proud of how Britain has tackled racism. I constantly think, yeah, this is a good place. But then I heard Michael Holding. It's just fascinating about language, about the way in which, when he was growing up, and different time, of course, a different time. But when he was growing up, black was always associated with darkness, and white was associated with goodness. And he said it was just there. And I think we have to think kind of more carefully than sometimes we do.
But will BLM happen all season? Or people?
No, it's not already. I think the politicization of that has made it different. The players are going to wear a different thing on their logo. I think it's a kick it out, the old FA thing. Yeah, kick it out is the football thing, anti-racist football organization. I think they're going to be wearing that rather than Black Lives Matter.
But I mean, the black footballers are now the majority of the English team are black.
But mixed race and black players represent a significant proportion of the England team.
With all the European countries, the empire strikes back in the football teams, doesn't it? In France.
Yes. Oh yeah, France. But I remember going back to 1998 in France. That the French team was the symbol of the new France, the united France, the multiracial France. And 22 years on, France is all anything but that, I would say.
Broadcasting, you've done a little bit of it, dominated by Sky. Is that healthy? Sky just buys it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at cricket, for instance, the last time cricket was free to air was the 2005 Ashes series, which was a wonderful series that got a lot of people interested in cricket, and then suddenly cricket disappears from our screens and goes into a specialist area. Now, you watch cricket on Sky, it is brilliantly presented. The commentators like Mr. Atherton that you were talking about, superb,
hold in.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
But it's a very limited audience, and it's not going to evangelize. And the problem you have, basically, football is the only sport that can afford not to evangelize. You need your moment on the national television. Think about the number of people who take up rowing after an Olympics. It's extraordinary how many people go down to their nearest rowing club. Oh, I quite fancy that. After Steve Redgrave or Mo Sabihi or whoever it is has just won a gold medal. We're all inspired because we've seen it on our TV. Look at hockey. Hockey in 2016 when the women won the gold medal, it became the hottest thing. North Oxford Hockey Club had queues around the block of people wanting to join hockey. You've got to be on free to air TV.
I mean, how many of the current England cricket team went to private schools?
I mean, it depends who's picked, but 90% of them do, because that's the only place that it's played anymore.
And is that a result of just becoming a niche thing on behind a pay television?
Yeah, I mean, there are just fewer people playing it because it's a sport that takes time, which is something we're all short of. It's a sport that takes space. It's a sport that takes preparation. So you've got to have a groundsman who's going. So it's expensive. That's something that hasn't been. I think one of the most destructive things that happened in this country was in the 1990s, when there was an unholy alliance of radical teaching assumptions that were anti-competitive and conservative local governments selling off playing fields. And the two of them were incredibly destructive for our national well-being, as we see now with the huge numbers of obese people that there are in the country.
And the only way for working class kids to come through is in football now, essentially.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I mean, you hear these stories, don't you, of kids who are being pushed by their parents because they see them as their gravy train. I mean, it's sad sometimes, very sad.
It's China as well. How long do you give BT in broadcast sport?
I wonder whether BT is just a fad. They do it fine, but I wonder. I mean, the whole point of their sport is to accelerate take up of their internet service. Sorry, of their broadband services. And it's you get the sports as part of your package if you sign up to the broadband. And I just wonder whether they'll find another way of doing it. It's expensive. Is it worth it? I'm not sure for them. I mean, I do think Sky's the whole subscription TV thing with Sky is a difficult one to sustain. I mean, my son is in his 20s, and he just knows ways of getting the football for free. He knows how to do it. You talk to any kid in their 20s, they know how to get football for free. They'll find a way of doing it. And I'm not talking about going to the pub. I'm talking about getting a streaming service on their laptop. They know how to do it. And the idea that any of them are ever going to buy subscriptions to Sky is nonsense.
So they're not going to pay 70 or 80 quid a month for Sky Sports.
Exactly.
And sport, any future on the BBC for sport?
I don't know. I mean, it depends what the Director General, the new Director General wants. There's been a diminution of it, and it's sad. The problems that with sport is it's expensive. It's expensive to deliver, and the rights are expensive. The actual outside broadcasting is expensive. And I fear for whether the BBC can keep going with it.
I mean, each Premier League match costs £11 million in rights alone, doesn't it?
That's right. And then you're talking about several £100,000 to actually put it on, get the cameras there, and so on. During the lockdown, we've had, because every match has to be screened live, because fans can't get to see it. They have had a couple of matches on the BBC. They always tend to get the scraps, don't they? The bits that have fallen off the table.
You do. I was at Oslo Airport about 8 years ago with Dave Gordon, Mr. Olympics for the BBC, when the fee for the Premier League came through. I forgot what it was, 4 point something billion, and he just couldn't believe it. He said, who's paying that sort of money? And it was Sky, wasn't it, who was paying that money?
Yes, and overseas contractors. I mean, one of the things about the Premier League that I think we cannot deny is that as a cultural export, it's our Hollywood. Yeah. You go to downtown Dar es Salaam and you'll see someone wearing a Newcastle United shirt. Yeah. It is just extraordinary. Wherever I have gone in the world, they have been fascinated by football. There's only 2 territories in the world that don't show live Premier League matches. One of them is North Korea and the other is Albania. And I think Albania may even be starting it this year.
Right. Now you've, in terms of your journalism career, you've moved from the sort of soft left to the harder left to Telegraph. What's the difference in writing for them?
On the sports pages, to be honest, there's no difference at all. It's an interesting question, that, because if you're at the Daily Mail and you're a sports writer, they don't expect you to be a Chelsea fan. You are just what you are. You write about sport, and the same, at the Guardian, they don't expect you to come up with stories that are anti-establishment or whatever. It's fascinating, and some of the best writing about the Hillsborough disaster, for instance, came from writers at the Times, at the Telegraph, talking about the iniquities of that disaster. So there isn't the same political intrusion that there is elsewhere.
I mean, some years ago, you told me in commentaries Martin Samuel was on 400,000.
Martin Samuel of the Daily Mail is on 400,000.
What's the salary now? Any idea?
I would suspect it probably hasn't gone up very much. Henry Winter, I mean, the story about Henry was that he was at the Telegraph, and Rupert Murdoch said, we've got to kill the Telegraph, we've got to overtake them. The Times has got to get into a position where it takes them. Who should we get from the Telegraph? And obviously everybody there said you should get Henry Winter and Matt, the cartoonist. Well, Matt wouldn't go, but Henry did. And I believe that was for money that would not look out of place in a Premier League dressing room.
Million?
I don't know. You'll have to ask him, John, but it was large. But it had noughts. It had noughts on the end.
Is he the highest paid sports writer?
Yes, he is. Yeah. I mean, one of the things about it, if anybody's got children or grandchildren who are interested in going into journalism, is becoming increasingly a low-paid profession. Down at the local level, you'd be lucky if you get £18,000 a year. It is a very, very poorly paid profession. It's fine at the very top, but how long that lasts, I don't know. It's a dying business, newspapers.
It is. I mean, you said years ago as well that your one of your commercial people said dead trees, throwing printed dead trees. There's no future in it.
Yeah, exactly. And subscriptions are the way forward. Before this, we were talking about Mark Thompson, the former Director General of the BBC, who's been at the New York Times. New York Times is very much a internet-driven organization now. Online subscriptions are massive, and it's hugely successful as a result.
10 million. 10 million online behind their paywall. 10 million.
10 million subscribers. Well, that's the way to go. I mean, interestingly, The Athletic, which is the new online football writers, full of fantastic football writing, they're claiming they've got 1 million subscribers. So maybe that's the new way.
Did they offer you a job on that?
The Athletic, no, they didn't, because they needed people who were A, young, and B, were going to bring a lot of social media followers And I'm neither of those things, John.
Now, we were talking earlier on about Match Report, but you've actually moved from Match Report into writing columns. Is that a different art, a different skill?
Yes, I mean the one thing about a column is it helps a lot if you've got an opinion, and you find there's a similarity between newspaper columnists and pub bores in that they have an opinion about everything.
And how do you get your opinions? Where do you get yours from?
It's often against someone else's. It's often a confrontational thing. Someone says something and you respond to it and go against it. I mean, it's an interesting one, this, because the paper loves it when you upset their readers. You think, how can that, why would that be? But if you can provoke the readers, then that really gets everybody very, very excited.
So where do your ideas come from, Jim?
I mean, in the old days, before we were doing this kind of thing, it's from talking to people, meeting people, having a cup of coffee with people. Now, I mean, editors are very important in that. You have discussions with them. They'll ring you up and say, could you do this? What about this? What do you think of this? I mean, my editor rang me up yesterday and said, oh God, I'm really cheesed off about the fact they're playing so many new caps in Southgate's playing so many new caps. I mean, you must be furious about that. I said, it was ever thus. I mean, friendly internationals have always been a complete waste of time. So I'm not really exercised about that. So he went off and got someone who was exercised about it to write that piece.
What are you writing about this weekend?
I've got a couple of things, actually. I mean, I've got, as I said, I did Gareth Ainsworth, the Wycombe Wanderers manager. But a funny story that Eton did a match against Harrow swimming the Channel 15 years ago. Eton versus Harrow swimming the Channel match. It's only one. It's only ever happened once. Anyway, 4 of the blokes who were in that, 2 from Eton and 2 from Harrow, 15 years on, are redoing it. And I spoke to them, and they're redoing it to raise funds for refugee charities, because one of them was swimming the Channel as a solo person earlier this summer, and his support vehicle was behind him, and they were swimming the Channel, and they came across 2 guys who were trying to get across the Channel in a inflatable canoe which was sinking. So they had to rescue these 2 guys, and they put them in their support boat. There's just one slight drawback in that he was swimming from Dover to Calais, so he took them back to where they'd been. But anyway, I'm going to be writing about them.
That's a nice story. Advice to the next Jim White: how does somebody become you?
I think you have to be. You have to be enthusiastic. You have to still love it. You have to love it. You have to genuinely want to be involved. I think enthusiasm is probably the most important element that you need. And I always say that the talents you need to get a job in journalism are the talents you need to be a journalist. You need to not take no for an answer. You need to ask questions. You need to, if you've got any contacts, you need to push them and press them and use them. And I actually think that the people who become journalists tend to deserve to have become journalists as a result. So
Self-selecting a bit, isn't it?
It's a bit self-selecting. So it's people who want it. It's going back to what I said about going to Wimbledon as a student with my girlfriend and seeing McEnroe. It's seeing something and wanting to tell people about it. You know, it's going to the cinema, and when you come out wanting to tell everybody what you've just seen. If you've got that innate ability, then that's what you need to translate and transfer. These days, when we were young, we would get trained up on local newspapers. Sadly, fewer and fewer of those exist, really sadly. And we could go on about why that is a diminution of our cultural stockpile all evening. But I think a lot of people now are going to universities to do postgraduate courses. Cardiff University do a very good one. City of London do a very good one. The Sheffield University do a very good one. And I think that increasingly those are ways in. So you go to Cardiff and your professor will know people and target you towards those places. There are schemes. The Telegraph, the Mirror Group, the Mail, all have trainee schemes. My slight worry about some of those is, you know, I know really talented people who've gone on those training schemes and then ended up at like Mail Online, which isn't journalism, it's journalism. You're basically sitting there going through endless other sources. You never pick up a phone and pursue your own story. Be wary of that kind of thing, but you know, those are good places. So probably get a postgrad degree and worth going for.
But do
one
a first
of the courses.
degree in English or history or something.
Definitely,
like
yeah. I would do that. I would do that. Yeah. I mean, there are plenty of journalism courses. I mean, there's a brilliant sports journalism course at University of Gloucester in Cheltenham.
Tom has circulated details of this to all of his people, by the way, Tom Bradshaw.
Yeah, and they have fantastic facilities and so on. So, you know, and a lot of those people get jobs. A lot of them get jobs in things like Premier League Football Club press offices and so on. And so that is another way in.
Journalism has been good to you, hasn't it? 37 years.
Oh, in every way, yeah.
I mean, I valued your house earlier on today. Do you want to know what it's valued at? I walked with one of your neighbours, 2.6 million, I'm told.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it has been incredibly good. More to the point, you know, you want to get up in the morning and do your job. That's the great thing about it. It's fun. Blimey, it's fun.
Yeah, you never regretted joining it. You don't wish you'd become a doctor or a dentist or.
No. But two of my children are actors, and my wife jokes when they say I'm an actor. She says, "No, darling, I meant doctor." You know, as they're sort of spending a lot of time resting. But yeah, no, it's an absolutely fantastic.
The actor of the British Asian family said, his father said, "What do you want to be?" He said, "An actor." And the father said, "That's a very funny way to spell doctor."
Yeah, exactly. So, no, it's been fantastic.
Jim, it's been a pleasure as ever talking to you.
Thank you, John.
Harcourt Arms, if it's ever open in a week or two's time, or when you run past my house, you know, we're living in very strange times.
Very strange times. Just finally say, I went to a few of the behind closed doors football matches. Yes. And you get very intimate at those because there's no crowd and you can hear exactly what the players are saying to each other. And I went to see Newcastle United play, and they have got a goalkeeper who is, I think, Slovakian. He's called Martin Dubravka. Yeah. I think he's Slovakian. And he's got a very loud voice, and he's got a fantastic Geordie accent. And I heard him shouting at one of his players, "Look over your shoulder," which I thought was, you know, I wouldn't have heard that without lockdown.
What language do managers like Mourinho and the others communicate to their players in, do you think?
Well, Mourinho, it could be anyone of about a dozen. But in England, it's English.
Really? So Pep and the others, they communicate in English, do they?
Yes, I mean the interesting one on that, John, is Marcelo Bielsa at Leeds, who's been at Leeds 2 years and still doesn't speak English. So he has a translator. And when you go to a press conference, I went to see Leeds last season, and the press conference, the translator uh, um, translates
Yeah.
what Bielsa's just said, and you couldn't understand a word the translator said. It was brilliant. It was the most fantastic obfuscation. So nobody had a clue what was going on.
Yes. Very last question. Greatest sportsman you've come across and the greatest manager you've come across?
Greatest manager is very, very easy. That's Sir Alex Ferguson. Absolutely.
You're biased, though.
No doubt about it. He's the greatest. What's fascinating about Ferguson is the way he developed over the years. So, he took on board all the new technologies and so on, and embraced them in a way. He was not old school. He was not hardened. He was not a dinosaur. He was a person who adapted to his times. Superb. And I think the equivalent of him now is Jurgen Klopp. I think Jurgen Klopp is by far the best current manager.
Always looks like he's enjoying himself, doesn't he?
He does. He does. He's a terrific. The players love him. He's a terrific guy.
He develops players, doesn't he? One-on-one.
Yes, he's great fun. He's great fun as well. I remember going to a match quite early on in his career, and Liverpool at the time were conceding a lot of goals from set pieces, from corners and free kicks, and they were drawing against somebody, and in the last second this team had a free kick and they missed, and so Liverpool got a draw. And in the press conference afterwards, I said to him, I bet your heart was in your mouth when they got a free kick at the end like that. And he goes, "Oh, my heart was in my mouth. Oh, interesting. No, my heart has never been anywhere near my mouth. I don't know this expression. What do you mean?" So the Liverpool press officer said, perhaps Mr. White would like to explain what he means. So I explained what he means. Anyway, about 3 matches later, we're at a press conference, and he saw me. He goes, "My heart is in my mouth," which I thought, that is a proper man.
And the best sportsman, it could be a football player.
Well, I mean, I think I absolutely love Mo Farah. I think he's incredible. I love Bradley Wiggins, but I think the greatest sportsman this country has ever produced is Daley Thompson. He was my absolute idol when I was younger. I thought he was just magnificent. He could do anything. Grumpy bugger though.
Often. Jim, thank you very much indeed. And just a quick plug for next Wednesday at 5:30, we've got the great Michael Cockerell, a TV legend, talking about Boris, making Boris famous, talking about Alan Clark, making him famous, and David Cameron as well. Cockerell has done them all and done a lot of them in as well. That's 5:30 next Wednesday. But thank you all very much, and